Hello and welcome to What's on My Mind with Fiona. I'm your host, Fiona Kane. I've got a little bit of news in regards to the gender affirming care, the stuff that's being done to children, talking about that today. Sorry to bang on about the same topic, but as long as they're harming children, it's still a relevant topic. So I will keep talking about it and I will keep updating you on the news. I've got some other topics coming up in the next few weeks as well, but just because it ends up being so much news in this topic every week, I keep sort of going, I've got to talk about this. So really important stuff. So I will just launch right into it. So I wanted to let you know about, so in the news this week. So this week, there was a bombshell article in the New York Times, and it reveals that the Johanna Olson-Kennedy, who is a prominent gender doctor who received millions of dollars, I think it's like about 10 million US dollars, funding from the NIH. Well, she has withheld her data on puberty blockers, fearing that the lack of positive results might fuel political attacks and prompt bans on youth gender treatments. Yes, you've got it right. So she's sort of, because she's so hell bent on her ideology, and she's doing the studies to prove a point, and what she's proved is that she's wrong. She's just doesn't want to share the information so that she doesn't have to change anything, and it just shows you the level of evil and or ideology and cultness, all of that mixed together it's breathtaking. And the person who describes it the best, J.K. Rowling. It's like she's a writer or something. So J.K. said exactly these words. Like, I'm sort of smiling just because it's, but it's obviously, this is not a funny topic. This is just horrendous. But anyway, J.K. said, "We must not publish a study that says we're harming children, because people who say we're harming children will use the study as evidence that we're harming children, which might make it difficult for us to continue harming children." That's it. That's actually the summary of the news. It's just, like I said, it's breathtaking, right? So essentially, the data shows no positive effects on puberty blockers on children's mental health, while at the same time stunning their development and harming their future fertility, sexual function, and all of that, but not helping their mental health. And one of the reasons, well, there's many reasons why this is so important. One is because, well, why are they using puberty blockers? It does so much damage, and it would appear it does nothing beneficial. Now, puberty blockers are used medically in children who have precocious puberty. So if they start going to puberty when they're sort of 6 or 7 years old. Now, in those cases, I suppose the risks are worth the benefits, because a 6-year-old going through puberty is just they're not ready for it, right? They're not physically or emotionally ready for it. So in that case, the puberty blockers play a role in delaying puberty, and those children, as far as I know, do go through a normal puberty, later on at an appropriate time. The problem with stopping puberty at a time when normal puberty should be happening is, it would appear, based on what we're seeing, the evidence that we're seeing, is it doesn't happen again later. So you don't then go through a normal puberty. So if you miss it when you should have it, so it's one thing to delay it when it shouldn't be happening yet. It's a whole other thing to stop it when it should be happening. And they say, well, it gives these children time to kind of, adjust and everything, because they don't want to be in this body, and it's going to be really terrible for them to, be growing into this body that they're in, that they don't feel comfortable in. But my answer to that is, the only way they're going to feel comfortable in it is, one, if they go through puberty, because what we know is a natural puberty actually cures this gender dysphoria in something like 85% of cases, if not more. The other is, they're not going to get used to being in their body or get comfortable in their body until they're in their body, right? So they actually need to go through the puberty and get used to being in their body. What we also know is many of these children, particularly the young girls who are sort of wanting to become boys, we know that the high levels of being on the autistic spectrum, of having been abused and or sexually assaulted or some assault like that, and also being bullied. So the combination of those three things are making them feel really uncomfortable in their body. And there was an example the other day. Ben Shapiro was doing a Jubilee video. It's one of these videos where they get the conservative in the middle, and then they get all of the basically the uni kids or the young, what they call liberals in the US, basically the more radical left types, right? And they kind of argue the point with the conservative, and they did it with Charlie Kirk a few weeks ago. So with Ben, this young, what turned out to be a woman who's transitioned into a man. Well, she's not really a man; she's still a woman, but whatever. And she was really quite aggressive and quite angry, but essentially she'd said that she'd been sexually assaulted, right? And when you look at other people like Ellen Page, who likes to call herself Elliot Page now, she had been sexually assaulted, right? So it's really not unusual unfortunately, for women when they've been assaulted to want to cut off the bits that relate to the assault, that remind them of the assault, whatever. So we need to treat that, not cut bits off, right? Excuse me, just having a drink. And lucky it's just water because I just tipped it all over myself as well. The drinking problem, have trouble finding my mouth. Anyway, all right. So I wanted to go more into that and into that story. So essentially, this woman, this doctor, she's one of the big ones behind all of this gender ideology. And, she's in the past, she's been recorded saying things like, oh, it doesn't matter if they regret that we cut off their breast. They can just always get a new set later. Well, no, it's not the same. It's not the same at all. And it's not, they're not going to be able to breastfeed if they decide to have children. And these children also, depending on what treatments they have, many of them will never have any normal sexual function, and they will never be able to have children, and they'll never. And it's not even just about sexual function and about sexuality. Your puberty, a lot of things happen in puberty that are important to your development into an adult on many levels. So it's not just about that. So these children miss out on a lot, and got these young girls going through menopause when they're 20, that kind of thing. It's so that they lose their bone and muscle and all sorts of things. It's just dreadful. So anyway, so this doctor doesn't want to publish the findings, and the other thing in regards to this is that in regards to them not improving, psychologically not improving when they do these, when they do the puberty blockers, is the argument that they use over and over again is, do you want to have an unalive girl or a live boy, or the other way around? Essentially, they say that your child will unalive themselves if you don't consent to them having these treatments, right? And the other thing they do is they tell the children to say that, or they tell the children that they will be want to unalive themselves, or they tell the parents that this is going to happen to the children. They tell the children to say that to the doctor, so that the doctor will actually approve it. But the doctor also tells them, she says, "Oh, this is what's going to happen to you." So I understand that some of these children do feel that way. Some of these young people do feel that way, but they don't all feel that way. But they're told they have to say they feel that way, or that they will feel that way. And I don't think it's healthy to tell children and encourage them that they might. Oh, well, if we don't affirm this and if we don't completely change everything, you're going to want to, end your life. Like, how is that okay, right? But that's exactly what's happening. And it's doctors telling them this, which is also disgusting. And so what happened is, so she doesn't want to publish it because it doesn't suit her ideology, which is terrible. She has a long history of just doing dreadful things to these children and not seeming to have any, not only does she not have any I'm just looking here. Not only does she not have she's not sorry for anything she's done. She thinks that these doctors, they think they're heroes. They think they're coming in and rescuing these children from their bodies, when they're actually, what they're doing is they're taking their rightful bodies off them and leaving them in some certain ways, disabled in kinds of ways, leaving them not being able to function, with dysfunction is probably a better word, but they're leaving them with dysfunction, often with all sorts of horrible effects and infections and long term, like they're making them lifelong medical patients that have to spend a lot of money on hormones and all of that kind of stuff. She said here, she said in 2022 that gender affirming medical care and surgical care is effective, beneficial, and necessary for transgender people suffering with gender dysphoria, including transgender youth. It's well documented and studied through years of clinical experience, observational scientific studies, and even some longitudinal studies. It also accepted standard of care. Well, no, it's not well documented. It's not well studied. And what we do know now, looking at all of the detransitioners, is that they don't go back to the original doctor and tell the original doctor. The doctors don't go and ask them. I think they only follow up for about the first 3 months. So that's really convenient, because the first 3 months after the surgery is often when they're having what they call, what do they call it? It's like they have a few months where they feel really wonderful about the fact that they've done this surgery. So they, it's kind of a known thing that for the first few months afterwards, because they think that the surgery is going to fix them and the surgery is going to fix all of their problems, they actually kind of felt, that's right, it's euphoria. They have this euphoria afterwards for a while. So if you only track them for the first 3 months, you just get them when they're going through the euphoria. Whereas if you track them further down, you realize that many of them regret it very bitterly down the track, and many of them become detransitioners, and they don't count them, they don't go looking for it. And when the CAS review did their report and found again that the CAS report, which is a 4-year study by Dr. Hilary Cass, who's got no, she's independent. She found that that these puberty blockers were not helpful at all, and there's no evidence that they were helpful. If anything, the opposite. Well, she couldn't even get the data from a lot of these places, and one is because I don't think they had the data; they just don't collect it, and secondly, they didn't want to give her the data, right? So they just don't want to acknowledge that there's people who detransition, right? So they say, oh, it's 1% or it's less than 1%. Well, no, it's way more than that. They just don't count it. You can't just not count it and then say it doesn't happen, which is what they do. So they don't count it and then they say it doesn't happen. And it's like with all these things, they say it's not happening, because when we first were talking about this happening to children, they say it's not happening, it doesn't happen. And then they say, well, it does happen, but it's very rare, which I think is what Kamala Harris is still saying. And, she says, oh, it's a fringe issue or something. And then they say, well, it is happening and it's really good. They kind of go through these stages talking about the same thing, even though the situation hasn't changed, just the way that they talk about it, how much they admit changes, right? So that she doesn't want to publish that data because it doesn't support her ideology. That's disgusting. So the other thing that is worth knowing about is, Billboard Chris, who I've talked about before, he published a video this week. So he basically goes out into the street, wears a billboard that says, what does it say? It says that children can't consent to puberty blockers. And he has conversations with people. They come up to him. Some of them are very abusive, but now more than ever, he gets a lot of support. And people come up and tell their stories. And actually, on the note that puberty blockers, that children can't consent, right? We understand that in other things, right? So we don't let children drink alcohol. The laws are sort of 18 or 21 or whatever it is in many Western countries. We don't let them get tattoos. We acknowledge that they can't consent to sex. So if an adult has sex with someone who's underage, that is classed as rape, no matter how much the child consented. They didn't consent because you just can't consent, no matter how keen they are, no matter what. None of that they weren't able to consent because they're not old enough to understand the ramifications, right? So we understand that with all of those things, right? So and other kinds of surgeries, we understand it, and there's so many things that they're not allowed to vote. There's so many things that we don't allow children to do because we understand that their brain is not formed enough, that they haven't finished going through puberty, they haven't gotten used to being in their body, their brain hasn't finished forming, so they just don't know. They might think they know what they want, but they don't know, and they could very well be wrong. So we know that about everything, but when it comes to the trans stuff, apparently they absolutely know and they're always right. It's like they don't know, but they do know, right? No, they don't know, right? And they're even saying, these activists are saying, oh, they start telling you at 18 months and 2 years old. Go away. Whatever they're telling you, they're not telling you they're trans, right? They're just exploring their body or talking or language or whatever. So anyway, so I was go back to Billboard Chris because that's what he wears, this billboard that says the children can't consent to puberty blockers. And this week he had a young woman come up to him. I think she's around 20. Her name was Clementine. Clementine is a victim of the doctor I was talking about before, the doctor who doesn't want to publish her results that don't support her warped treatments of children. And anyway, Clementine went to this doctor. This is what Clementine says. So I'm just basing it on what Clementine says. And she said that she had a half an hour consultation with this doctor. Clementine had been previously sexually abused as a child. The doctor didn't bring any of that up, ask about any of that. The doctor just asked her these kind of like, oh, do you like hanging out with boys? Are you kind of into boy stuff? Within half an hour, she actually approved her for puberty blockers, so she was put on puberty blockers. She was 12 years old. So no kind of no looking at, sexual assaults and how they might have affected her fears about growing into a female body, right? Which would be pretty obvious what that is. None of that, just straight away within half an hour, puberty blockers at 12 years old. Then at 13, she was put on testosterone. At 14, she had her breasts removed, her healthy breasts. And at 17, she had hormone-induced psychosis. So this girl has since realized that she really is a girl and she's stopped taking all of these things and she's what you call a detransitioner. And it's a matter of time before we see what happens with her and if she's ever able to have children or any of those sorts of things. She's probably lost the ability to have children and the ability to have normal sexual function, and definitely the ability to breastfeed. We will see. But no one asked her about other things. They've got to ask about the other things that could be contributing because we know they often are. And, she felt uncomfortable in her body. So do a lot of people at that age for so many reasons. And she also was told that she would want to unalive herself if she didn't change, right? So the doctor actually fed that to her. She wasn't feeling that way, but the doctor told her that, right? So again, this is an example of what they're doing. So when people are talking about this, I hear them, people who are defending this, they're saying, oh, no, it's really rigorous and blah, blah, blah. And once upon a time when there used to be transsexuals, it was very rigorous. It is not rigorous now, not if within 30 minutes you can be on life-changing medications. That's not what I call rigorous. So there was another story this week as well. So there was a cover of National Geographic in 2017. So I'm reading this on Restore Childhood, which is an X account. So it's XRSTORE Childhood. And in 2017, a 9-year-old Avery Jackson became the poster child for trans kids after being featured in the cover of National Geographic. Now Avery's 17, and so we're sort of looking at what's happened to this child. So Avery was born a boy, and so there's a video. There's all this video footage, and it's worth going and actually having a look at it on X. But anyway, there's different video footage along the way. So I think this child pretty much became a big poster child for activists and very involved in activism and and the mother, to credit the mother, I think that she she was doing her best to try and help this child, and she's Googled and found out that, oh, it must mean your child's trans because the child was uncomfortable with their genitals, and that was the answer she got. And when she went to the doctors confirmed the mother's Googling, so confirmed that this child was in the wrong body. So that, it's not just having a got the parents are reliant on getting good information, and this woman got really bad information. So anyway, there's this video of this child climbing and playing and being a ninja and all that sort of stuff. But this child at the same time, they said, then the child said, oh, I know I'm really a girl inside and all that sort of stuff. But the child also said, so it says here, the child shows great self-awareness when he says, sometimes I like to play as an animal, a ninja or a princess, but it doesn't mean my parents should treat me that way because it's just make-believe. Now, instead of listening, his parents affirmed. So they kind of went online, went to the doctor, found out that he really was a girl trapped in a boy's body, and started transitioning this child. So this child was kind of saying, in one way they're saying, oh, look, I think I'm a girl. And the other way they were actually saying, this part of them knew and was saying the sensible thing. But the parents, once they were on the track and told it was trans, it was trans. So National Geographic sort of did this cover story, and they did a transhood documentary, and so Avery and some of the other kids, they were tracked for 5 years, and so there's a follow-up clip from 5 years later he must have been around 12 then, and the mother's sort of saying what they're doing for the day, and they were going to some, I don't know, Congress or some political thing because this child is an activist, right? And, we're going to go and do this, and the child's just looking exhausted and says, oh, no, don't want to do it. No. And the child pretty much says, this is, what does he say? He says, he says it's ruined his life. He doesn't want to do this anymore. All this activism has ruined his life. He just doesn't want to be part of it anymore. And the mother's, really, really shocked. And she just dismisses what the child says. And it's interesting because these people and this family and throughout the special, they kind of say, these trans activists say that their parents must listen and affirm their kids. But what they do is they listen once, and as soon as a child says they think they're trans, they affirm that, and that's it. That's the last time they listen. After that, they're trans no matter what. Well, in this case, that's what happened because the child was clearly saying that, the child might be saying two different things, but it's the adult's job to be the adult in the room and kind of recognise that the child might say conflicting things because they're a child, but it doesn't mean that the child is right, and you should you've got to balance the things and kind of make an adult choice, which is that this child was a boy and should still be a boy. So anyway, so didn't listen to the child. Now, they've followed up this child more recently on this, and this child's been, confirmed by President Biden and all that kind of stuff. Everyone's affirmed that this child is really a girl. Well, guess what? So now this child is 17. So the 7-year-old boy who said he was a girl inside who loved pink, butterflies and dresses made a shocking revelation 10 years later. It's not really a shocking revelation, not if you understand this stuff. But anyway, apparently it's a shocking revelation. So he revealed that he wasn't really a girl and that he was non-binary. Now, I would argue that, well, non-binary is not even a thing. It's a made-up thing. It just means he's really, it's really a boy. But non-binary is kind of the closest with all the language that this child's been bathed in all these years, and the fact that they've been put on hormones and been confused the hell out of and all the rest of it. Non-binary is the best they can say because that's kind of non-binary is the person's step back to being a boy, isn't it, right? So I understand why they say non-binary because that's kind of a step in the direction that the child wants to go in because the child naturally knows that he's a boy. So, it's like shocking. Oh, they want to go back. No, this child said it, and I'm sure there's child's said it more than once along the way. But once they get caught up in this, right? So especially if they become, and so many of them become activists, or their parents kind of have become famous because they've got this activist child, and the parents, they have reality shows. I think some of this ends up being Munchausen's by proxy. It's the new version of Munchausen's by proxy, where the parent gets lots of attention and it's important because they're an activist. And, and as these activists all think that they, like this doctor, they all think that they're just wonderful, good, compassionate, wonderful human beings who are saving these children. And I get that they might believe that, but it's just not true. I think some of them are just nasty and evil, and some of them are just caught up in believing that they are saviors of these children. They're not, but they believe they are saviors. It's just so sad. And so these children are just become victims of that. In another 10, 20 years, we're just going to have all these kids grown up and sort of just saying, look, what the hell did you do to us? It's, and they're beginning to, it's actually already happening. There's lots of detransitioners, and they're all saying the same thing, and they're all taking these doctors to court. When all these doctors get taken to court and sued the hell out of and lose their medical licenses, that might be when they understand what they've done is wrong. So that's, a couple of stories. There was also another really interesting one. I won't go into the whole story here, but Maya Poet, and Maya was interviewed this week on, it was Andrew Gold's Heretics, and Maya had a really, really interesting story. Another one where, basically Maya's a butch lesbian, but she got caught into thinking that she was a man, and she's not. Her parents were smart enough not to affirm it. They still loved and supported their daughter, but they didn't affirm it. And she ended up going and she was living in Israel, and she's sort of, because she was a butch lesbian, a lot of people in the Middle East assumed that she was a boy, so she did start living as a boy. But after the 7th of October and the events of that day, she soon realised that she's just a butch lesbian, which is fine. Like there's no rules for how girlhood should be, or how boyhood should be, or how women or men present. They can just be who they are. That's fine, but they still are their sex, right? Which is what this person realized. So that episode is really worth watching or listening to as well. Really interesting story. We've got to listen to these children. We've got to have compassion for these children. We've got to support them, absolutely. But we've got to be the adults in the room, and we've got to understand that for the most part, they need love, they need support, they might need therapy for whatever's going on for them. That's making them feel this way. They need to be taken away from these environments where they're getting, the online environments or schools or wherever else they're being indoctrinated, and they needed to be supported to just become healthy adults that they were meant to be in whatever sex they are, who can express themselves however they like. There's nothing wrong with if they want to be feminine, masculine, blah, blah, blah. Not an issue. It's just you are the sex you are. But you can be a butch lesbian if you like, which is what, which we've known forever that, right? So we've known that forever, and now we're just trying to trans all these girls who are just butch lesbians, which is fine. And you can be, obviously, I don't need to go in there. People will pick on this anyway, but, you can be whatever kind of lesbian you want, right? But only women can be lesbians, by the way. Men can't. All these men who think that they're lesbians, no, you're not. You're a man. So a man can't be a lesbian. They can be gay, but not a lesbian. Anyway, I will leave it at that, but I just want you to know the stuff that's going on. I want you to know the crap that these people are getting away with. I want you to know that the studies, when they say these things are safe, they're not. The studies are all coming back saying it's unsafe. That's why they've stopped doing these things in Norway and Northern Europe. It's why the Cass report has got them stopped doing these things in the UK, and in some states in the US they've stopped doing it, but the radical lefties are still pushing it through in the US, and in Australia we're still going ahead with all this stuff. So people are walking it back because they've realized it's a great mistake, and we're really harming children, and we need to not be harming the children. And I will talk about this until we stop harming children, and it's the adults, and it's the doctors, and it's the psychologists, and whoever. It's the experts that should not be just doing this affirmation only model, which is cruel and terrible for these children whose lives are ruined ultimately. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Please, like, subscribe, and share. Let me know what you think. If you're on YouTube or Rumble, you can put in a reply. And I don't talk to trolls. I just talk to people who want to have a conversation. And I'll see you next week. Thanks. Bye.